my understanding is you kind of get a deal with Disney's Hollywood Records, and they just kind of stall you for a while. You kind of do that spin that they would do.
Well, what happened is we delivered the record that was 16 Stone to them, and that's the story is according to the guy from our label, Rob Kahane, that they at the record at the company they threw the CD at him and said not only are there no singles on this record, there's no album tracks, and threw the record at him.
Everybody, of course, talks about Nirvana, and there's good reasons for that. But really, it was the Pixies that I think cracked our heads open. We thought we can be cool and play rock.
Yes.
It seemed to all kind of mash it together at the right moment.
I was lost. It'd be fair to say that what I'd done exactly at that point is I had been in London and my second band had failed. And I was left looking what to do. And it's the first time in my life I was worried about it, because before that I had like the brazen youth, like it will come right, it will come right. And that was just the most helpful sort of signpost on a bleak mountain.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so thrilled.
We've known each other now about almost 30 years, somewhere in there.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And I was saying that I was so happy that not many things are that surprising. When I got that call to come here, and I was like, that's so exciting. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. I usually like to start different places, but with you, I want to start at the beginning. So is it true you didn't speak till you were 4 years old?
Yes. I think I had a bossy older sister, so she took care of a lot of that. And for whatever reason, there seemed to be no point. Maybe I hadn't thought of anything good to say.
What was it? It wasn't a developmental thing? It wasn't tongue-tied?
No, it just was just a feral attribute, early feral signs of life.
It's a pretty early age to decide, you know what, I'm just not going to talk.
Yeah, I'm just, I have this thing anyway about making music that, because there's already too much music in the world, but not enough great music. It's like, you just should make things when you can improve the silence. And I couldn't figure out how to improve that silence.
That's an interesting concept.
I couldn't figure it out. And it was really, I was just sort of point what I needed, and I think my sister enjoyed the control over me. So I learned to be controlled by women at an early age.
We'll get to that. I didn't find a lot of information on what your parents were like.
Right. Yeah, very interesting. It's sad in a way, because when they met, my dad was driving rally cars, but amateur, right? Doing rally driving.
But like F1 type tracks, or road rally?
Rally, like way down the thing. But he was in a little...
But this is where they go through the villages and almost run people over.
Yeah, and then and my mom was from Scotland, from a small town in Scotland. And she'd come to London to be a model in the swinging 60s or whatever. And when they met, they both... he stopped driving and she stopped modeling to sort of like help, I don't know, to have a marriage. I thought it was a real shame. They should have continued on.
Oh, okay.
So they were together till I was 12, and then I grew up just with my dad.
But what were their personalities like?
Well, my dad was really, he passed a few years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. It's so weird. Everything's 2 years ago now. COVID destroyed all timings.
Right?
My brain just goes, everything, if it's not now, it's 2 years ago.
It's almost like pre-COVID, post-COVID brain. Do you feel that?
Yeah, BC. Literally. So he was a really gentle, really funny, sly, like sushi chef, cut you up with wit, but very demure, understated. And then my mum was really fun. She was she was the best out at dinner, with a nice cold white wine and just living the life. She was sort of she lived like that. So it was an interesting balance between the two. So I think I have mostly my dad's characteristics, I think, a little bit more laid back. I'm not the kind of artist that is in a room full of people just really wants to play everyone my new song. Some people want to do that. Check it out, and then everyone's sort of around. I'll do it, but it's not my natural state to do that.
Why did your parents get divorced?
I think my mom was looking for that bigger life, and I think that he was a bit more not looking for that big life. And so I think there's a disconnect there. And so I felt that she was searching, which I thought was a really good lesson to learn at 12, that to understand why someone leaves because they're searching for something. And we reconnected when I was about mid-20s. And I'd see her every year, more or less, but she had different husbands, boyfriends and this and that. So it was a bit disconnected, which is like really fertile ground for our world. That's really, really good.
Yeah.
That's really good.
But I mean, is it, it sounds a little bit like the John Lennon story where his mom kind of goes out of his life. She's around, but he ends up living with an auntie.
Right.
So in this case, you're living with your father and I think an aunt.
Yeah, my aunt for a while. Yeah. And then she.
But was that painful for you that your mom's kind of like around?
Well, she wasn't around. She moved out of actually England for a couple of years.
Okay.
And then she moved out of town, so she was really elusive. I don't know where she was.
Was she just sort of living the gypsy life? Or?
Well, no, she just had 2 or 3 stepfathers, husbands that she would move with wherever they were. So.
But did you feel abandoned by all that, or?
Yeah, of course. It was. I think about it most now when I look at my kids that age, and I just think, if I go upstairs and no one's getting the orange juice out of the fridge and they're like dumbfounded as to how to put the glass and the orange juice together from the other side of the kitchen, or going on tour when I feel horrible when I go on tour, and it's easier now because I'm a little bit older, but when they were really younger, just that guilt, that hollow guilt. So no, I reflect on that a lot, and I think that, wow, because there's no therapy then, and no one said to me ever, how you doing? You're right. I was a very mixed up kid. I lived in quite a rough neighborhood, but then went to a really intellectual school. So I had the kind of like the split life where no one trusted me, no one liked me for,
Okay.
I was sort of caught in 2 worlds. And so that creates inner worlds, and those inner worlds are the reason we're here. That's how we got here.
So I knew a little bit about your history in late 70s, 80s music scene, that you were around seeing some of these great artists that are now considered legendary and influential, but at the time they were just kind of punk rock, or I don't know who you were particularly influenced by. I saw a couple things, but I know that's probably a little bit more specific than that. But I think it was attributed to your sister.
Yeah.
Kind of turned you on to this music when you were about 12 or something.
Yeah, what happened is she was really very cool punk. So when punk hit, she was really just...
Did she dress punk and was punk?
Yeah, it's all the kind of the egg white in the hair, and just right at the turn of it. And so it was like a real revolution. I mean, it was a revolution in England.
You realize it still now. It's such a watershed moment in music history.
The Italians with the green mohawks in Piccadilly Circus are trying their best to keep it going, but it really had its moment then.
Yeah.
And so it was exciting to be part of that. And so for me, I fit into that role of the kind of the cute young kid who just was go along with them.
Like tagging along, yeah.
Yeah, and outside my house where we lived, the 31 bus, right outside my house, would go down to World's End. And what we had there was, on the King's Road, we had the punks, would be one side of the street and all congregating around Seditionaries, Malcolm McLaren, Vivian Westwood shop. And then you'd have the Teds, who they were meant to be they're all fighting. I never saw people fight like that.
That's like the leftover
mods, Teds.
Yeah.
That was the and then walking up and down. So we'd get the 31 bus and we'd park up there and walk up and down the King's Road all day, didn't have any money, just like the bus money. And then, stuff like that's at the beginning of Public Image. Public Image played on the rooftop of this building. We didn't get in. We were just all in the street. Yeah. I was just like a 12-year-old kid. It was all happening.
Amazing.
And so what that did is it really shook up the fire in me, performance-wise. Like I just obsessed with the Sex Pistols and Johnny Lydon, just his performance and that whole Richard III thing, that whole stage thing was just brilliant. Everything about him was just everything that I sort of wanted to be, even though I was not I was not a kid in a council estate. I was surrounded by council estates, but it just spoke to me, that sort of rebellion and that sort of
Yeah.
autonomy in that.
What about the rebellion spoke to you, think?
I just think that the making your own way and sticking up for yourself, and not make you a brat, but just make you have that sort of tenacity to just follow your own way. Like, for example, I used to go to school every day where they'd sing Latin hymns, and I'm not religious at all, right? But I think that's where I learned my sense of cadence and melodies, because I would hear those things. I always use biblical references in my lyrics, but I'm not. And so during that time, for example, I'd sit in the church and I'd see people and I'd be like, because I really did not feel connected to a God, a living God, or a God that people see it as traditionally. I was like, come on, we can't all be. Come on. I'd be looking around in the congregation or whatever, if I go to, and I'd be, you really, is that where you really feel that? And I've always disconnected from that. And then the biggest irony would be that I got a half brother who, with my dad, had three wives, but his first wife, he had a son with, and that son went on to become like a really successful person in the church. He's like
Oh,
a
okay.
bishop.
That's
So
interesting.
yeah, so there's a real, between the two of us, definitely a wide range of things.
Yeah.
A wide range, a wide berth.
So what were some of the artists that you saw in those kind of early punk?
Well, the thing was,
Not just punk too, because I'm more of a goth, new waver, but those, because it's such an interesting period.
yeah. Well, at that time I was too young to see the coolest bands that were happening. What happened for me is that I would there was a record store at the top of my street. Like the 31 bus was there on Fairfax Road, and then above it there's just like 30 feet away is the record store. So what that gave me was every week when I take my pocket money for doing chores around the house, cleaning stuff up wherever I could or not for my dad, I would get all these singles, and I go up every week, and and so I just fell in love with all these different bands. X-Ray Specs was probably my favorite. Uh, Sex Pistols, well, not the UK subs, but I like this guy, um, 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 Ian Jury.
Yeah.
Ian Jury and the
Blockheads,
Blockheads.
yeah.
It just was Billericay Dickey and all these. And what happened was, and then there was just some reggae thrown in, and then all these people around my house, all these like punks, they were like a couple of years older than me, and I just thought they were so f***ing cool. And they lived their life. There were squats. My sister would take me to the squats. I just couldn't believe that it just seemed like freedom. It was like, they were like anarchy and freedom, and they live in these squats around the corner from my house. And we'd go to these mansion blocks. And I was like just the token kid. So I like that spirit. So that just transferred. And really, the more that I think about it, even though I'm pushing maybe faster than you want.
No.
That's what got me into that performance of, the time when I was making music in London. It didn't really, the whole Britpop thing didn't have any performance connected to it. There's nothing.
What was the shoegazers, right?
Yeah. And I loved my Birdie Valentine. That's one of my favorite bands. But not to go and see, go and see the Throwing Muses, and it's not a big show, And so I like that performance stuff. And that's what I liked about I never saw, I loved the Gang of Four. I never saw them live. They were just a little bit before I could get in places.
Yeah.
So it was really like people like Perry, Perry and Jane's Addiction. I saw at this really tiny club in Portobello Road. And that just was just one of those life-changing moments of just to be mesmerizing. Like I'd seen Jim Morrison on video, and I'd be like, he's got this sinewy way on stage, and he's trying to, and I was trying to work out my own stage thing and starting in it, being terrible, and just like, what do the great people do? And that's why often it comes back around, and I think that's what I love so much about the guitar sound that I was hearing from America with James, with Alice and Chains, with yourself. It just was. It was so much. It was exciting to me. I didn't want to be people.
Now you're skipping ahead of my story.
Yeah, so my bad. But I've been thinking about it. So
no, because where I was going to go next is when did you pick up a guitar? Like were in this arc did you pick up a guitar?
Well, I got given a bass when I was 14, and I used to take. You began with that question, and my sister's boyfriend had a band, so what I did was like just help them move gear around and go to the rehearsal rooms, and rehearsal rooms like I do. It's like that dank squalor stink.
The worst.
Everything sounds awful. Filthy mirrors,
Smell beer, yeah.
dirty sink, and I fucking loved it.
I
loved it.
I'm still like, ugh.
I know. It just sort of felt that I was there to get something done.
Yeah.
It just felt like you don't want it that everyone would do it. Like if it was like sort of flying first class in Emirates to do a band, literally too many people would be doing it. Yeah, I like the fact you have to go through this rite of passage and you have to accept the stink.
Yeah. So when do you start playing the guitar?
The guitar was probably 16, 17, and just getting really trying to understand how people wrote this sort of Dylan, Neil Young,
right,
busking.
So it's more you were think of it as a songwriting.
All as a songwriter. I mean, it's only much later on that I just was. I started studying much more, and I went to see a great guitar teacher that I still work with today, the legendary Jean-Marc. He's very well known in LA. And I said to him, because he was working with my guitar player Chris, and I said to him, "Listen, will you come and teach me? I'm getting lost around the net. This is ridiculous. I need to get it together." And he goes, I said, "And by the way, I'm a songwriter. I'm not Chris. Don't be." He goes, "Yeah, but your compositions are awesome." So he was. So yeah, it began like that, and yeah, it just began like that. I think it began much for me more lyrically was what I felt that I could offer first, more than being able to come in and being any good at rearranging four chords.
Because there's this band you were in, Midnight, which I didn't know about till I started studying you up.
Right.
I was kind of surprised. What's interesting to me when I heard it was you sound like you even then. You're singing.
Right.
Your cadence of your singing and your voice is already there.
Right.
So it sounds like the Gavin that we all know, but basically in front of a synth band. That's a fair...
Yeah. Well, what happened is that I had this amazing... Because it all comes through ignorance, from my perspective. It all comes through sort of pushing yourself. So when I was leaving school, I just thought it'd be so great to be a singer, because that really was like...
Never crossed your mind before?
Well, yeah, I was in a band at school, but we spent most of our time discussing what the name of the band was and playing jam songs. We did 3 or 4 jam covers. So it just was like we couldn't get anything going. And then...
Okay, but what period of the jam?
Down in the tube station at midnight.
Yeah, right, okay. Because, if you're a jam person, you got to kind of pick your period.
Right. No, we didn't get into the Style Council, even though I did like those records. Paul Weller, I think, is really amazing, really incredible.
Yeah.
So I had the weird thing about I used to sing verses and songs into a tape recorder and say to the guy, I didn't know enough. I'd be like, "You must have a load of chords no one's given the chance to play." And so people I knew from my school. And I was like, I said, "Play like, the Stone Roses, it's really happening." I said, show me what are indie chords. And I remember the guitar player in Midnight going to me, "That's just people that can't play very well."
That's kind of true in a way, but
I was like,
but they work.
Yeah, but there's a barbarism to it that is essential that he was missing, that I tuned to much later as I got better at guitar. And all that happened is that then the next band I was in, which had a number of names,
throw one at me if you could.
There's the Little Dukes. There was
I heard about that.
Head with 2 Ds, but then there's another bit. So that was the Little Dukes, right? But he was a really good guitar player. He is a really good guitar player, but really super bluesy. Now, for whatever reason, the blues don't sit with me. I've never really used the blues apart from...
Can I say something I love? Because when Jane's Addiction first started breaking in America, there was an article in Rolling Stone, and they were in the rehearsal room with Jane's. And the line that really stuck out in my head was Dave was playing something and Perry said, "No blues." Because if you think of James, they solved the problem of playing rock without sounding bluesy.
Yeah, I mean, I've just
right? Somehow they sound epic.
Mhm.
They're playing the same chords, but it doesn't sound bluesy.
Right,
Which growing up in Chicago, there's always the shadow of the blues.
of course.
Especially if you do A to D to E. It's like, that's every
Right,
blues song ever, right?
right. Well, it's just a sound, isn't it? And that's why I never like it. I always bristle when everyone calls Bush rock and roll, because I'm always like really proud of the fact that we avoided all lots of blues changes, lots of blues approach.
Yeah, I have a bit in here about that. So like hold that thought a little bit.
The slide obviously is bluesy that we did all over the first record and that thing, but
I think you've completely avoided this.
Yeah, we have. It's just a certain sound, and
But let me get to that, please. Okay. What I try to do when I talk to somebody that I like is I try to think like, what don't I know? And oftentimes, what surprises me is there's a lot of things I thought I knew I don't know, right? And then when I fill it in, I get a much more three-dimensional picture of what actually happened.
Right.
You know what I mean? And especially because we were both doing it at the same time.
Right.
Your memory is like images flashing by in a window. But to slow it all down and go back through it, like it made me appreciate things about you that I hadn't appreciated before. So that's kind of what I want to get at, but you got to let me get there. So when did you first start hearing, obviously there was things like the Valentines, My Bloody Valentine in UK as early as I think 89 that was going on. And there was bands like Ride and stuff like that. And then obviously across the pond, as you all say, there was the Seattle thing. There was what was going on in Minneapolis. Like what part of all that, right? What part of all that like first got your attention and around what year?
The year might be tough, but whenever Surfer Rosa, I was obsessed with 4AD records,
Yeah. Well, it's 88?
4AD.
Surfer Rosa 88, 8 or 9?
88, 89. So what happened was...
is that the album after Doolittle?
No, it's before.
Okay, right.
So it was like...
You're talking about the Pixies, so it makes sense with the hell.
So what happened is that like Aerosmith were ruling the world, or like hair metal bands, right?
Oh yeah.
They're doing rock. Now when I would listen to those, I'd enjoy Aerosmith, which are super bluesy, but only because I just couldn't believe his voice. It's just the most incredible instrument, one of the greatest voices of all time, I think. So I loved him, but I felt really disconnected from any ability to go anywhere near that style of music. It just seemed I didn't have the pants tight enough. So when I played the Pixies, and I remember the moment, because the most beautiful artwork with Vaughan Oliver, who I subsequently hired to do Razorblade Suitcase record because I loved him so much. If I couldn't get signed to the label, I might as well use their art director, right? And when I put that record on, and I opened, just the Steve's sound, well, it was the sound of the Pixies, but actually Steve's sound, which is just Steve's drum sound. And then hearing, Michael, Frank Black, whatever, singing, I suddenly realized that it was possible to make rock music, emphatic music.
I think we all had the same realization at the
singing like that.
I think we all had the same realization at almost the exact same time.
Really?
Well, Cobain talked about it a lot.
Right.
I saw them in that exact same period, and I had the same revelation. It's like, how are you generating this power, but you don't sound like all those other bands?
Is that what happened?
It was, everybody, of course, talks about Nirvana, and there's good reasons for that. But really, it was the Pixies that I think cracked our heads open. We thought we can be cool and play rock.
Yes.
It seemed to all kind of mash it together at the right moment.
I was lost. It'd be fair to say that what I'd done exactly at that point is I had been in London and my second band had failed, and I was left looking what to do. And it's the first time in my life I was worried about it, because before that I had like the brazen youth, like it will come right, it will come right. And that was just the most helpful sort of signpost in a bleak on a bleak
Yeah.
mountain of where to head towards, and then you have to make your way. Kim being the perfect foil for him. There's so many things about it you can't emulate, you can't do. They were unbelievable. But that was where I really felt liberated, that there was hope, that there was a way forward. You have to forge your own way. And if you look at, then you get into you find Fugazi, and you find who I just think they're the greatest band. That turned me on to the Jesus Lizard. That's why I was listening to all of Steve.
We had a lot of that in Chicago because Jesus was Chicago.
Of course, yeah.
And everybody would come through and play the Metro in Chicago.
Yeah.
So we got every one of those bands.
Right.
I saw Happy Mondays open for the Pixies on Doolittle.
Wow.
Packed Metro. I mean, you couldn't move.
Right.
And of course, the Mondays were an hour and a half late because the lead singer was getting a VD shot.
Oh.
So the Mondays made everybody wait an hour and a half to start the gig. And when the Mondays came on to play, the crowd booed him out of the building. And the Mondays being Manchester, right? One of these. And they just started playing. And by the end, the crowd loved them. I've never seen a band turn a hating, crowing object crowd into loving them in 60 minutes, like I've seen in that gig. And then after that was then the Pixies doing Doolittle in that moment in Chicago, with Steve and his whole world there, because obviously the connection. So those were really interesting ground zero moments,
Right.
Saw Soundgarden, same time, Louder Than Love, that tour.
Yeah, that was. You see, that for me was just the record, because I was stuck in London, so I would hear that record. When I heard that Louder Than Love, I feel that confusion of
what is this?
Yeah.
I remember the first time I heard them, I think I couldn't tell if they were taking the piss. And actually some people I knew were like, oh, it's a joke. They're not really playing heavy. They're pretending to play heavy.
Right.
But then you'd listen to Chris sing and you'd think, I don't know if they're pretending. There's no fucking way you could sing like that.
Right. And of course, Alice in Chains.
Great. Fantastic.
And that Man in the Box was, Dave Jordan. It just was like, there was hope. It was just sort of, it felt like, that was when it made sense that I began my journey really focusing on the words and thinking that other people were doing the music. And inadvertently, people weren't doing the music. So when my second band, where the guy wouldn't let me play, I wasn't, he didn't want me to play guitar because he was a really, really good guitar player. But the point about it is, as we know, it's not about being the best guitar player, it's having the right chords to support the song.
Well, even the feeling.
Right. So to support the song. And so it just unlocked something in me. But it's interesting but what about with you? When did you start playing guitar? Because you're so musical. That must have been an early journey. You didn't know, like a ragamuffin like me coming in late with,
Well, my father was a professional musician, and he was a really great guitar player. So I started playing about 82, but I wanted to be a metal guitar player. So all my thank you. All my early playing was all shredding.
Right, of course.
Yngwie Malmsteen, Richie Blackmore, Eddie Van Halen.
Right.
That's all I did for the first couple of years. And then I had a disabled brother. I still have a disabled brother. And because I had to take care of him a lot, I would be stuck inside the house. So I would play the guitar sitting on the bed, and I would think it was so boring just to play chords. It sounded so boring to me. So I started playing that style where it would sound like two guitars at once. I'd never heard The Cure. And the first time I heard The Cure, I was like, wow, somebody plays like me. Because of that, Susie and the Banshees, or whatever that style is, that open style. And that's when I started to merge this idea of metal, and this idea of let's call it alternative guitar.
Right.
Took
me a long time to catch up. Hey, that's my thing now.
I mean, I was doing that stuff I had a band called The Marked that played in Florida that played that style in 85. So I was combining Sisters of Mercy and Metallica in 85.
Wow.
But the band wasn't very good. So I gave it up. And then I picked it back up when Jimmy Chamberlain joined the Pumpkins, and that's when we started playing rock. So we were playing rock by 88 in earnest. And then we'd see bands coming through like Soundgarden and Jane's and stuff like that. We opened for Jane's. And so we start to see this, there's this other thing happening. So that's kind of where that all came from. But it all came from having played metal first,
Right.
not new wave.
Yeah. That's the great thing. It's like working when I work with Paige Hamilton.
Yeah, great. I'm pretty sure we either opened for them once or I saw them once
Right.
on the famous album.
Right. Meantime.
Oh, are you kidding?
Yes.
Because nobody was really playing downtune then.
Yeah.
So when you heard it live,
Yeah.
and it was a place that held like maybe 200 people.
Right. Yeah.
So good.
We did. I did I always wanted to. You're always somewhat chasing, especially when you're younger, like chasing a tail. I thought, I know if I do a side project, it's going to look really creative and look, it's really cool when people do side projects. On Touch and Go, they do side projects in like 4 weeks and then go back to the band. I was on Interscope, so it took me a couple of years of Jimmy Iovine making me write hit singles. I'm like, this is a side project. I'm just trying to be on, I'm meant to be on Matador Records. What are you doing to me? I want to go back to my other band afterwards. And, I remember, and Paige came in to produce us.
So it's just for context. You're talking about
Institute.
After Bush broke up.
Yep.
You do this.
Well, I did this. They took a break, and one guy the guitar player felt he wanted to spend more time with his kids, and I said I want to do this side project because I always thought it looked cool when people do side projects, and for whatever reason I thought it'd be a fun thing, and so I had a few songs and detuned songs. It was really fun down a C sharp. And Paige said, I'd love to do the record. And he goes to me, as we're leaving the meeting, he goes, all the songs are in C sharp, right? They're all in drop. I was like, yeah, absolutely. I hadn't written them. I was like, yeah, of course they are. Went off and just wrote a whole lot.
Yeah.
And so getting to that whole detune thing was really fun. I'm obsessed with detuned guitar now.
Yeah.
It's the whole world.
Just so you know, I have a new guitar model that's tuned D to D.
Wow.
So it's the whole normal guitar dropped a whole step down. And then if you want to drop it, then it's C.
So DADGAD.
Yeah. No, it's the whole guitar's
Oh.
D, G,
Right.
C, F. It's normal guitar. It's a little slightly longer.
Yeah.
And it's pitched for downtuned guitar.
Oh,
I got to get you one.
I've got to get one.
It's good. It's
Who
really
did you
good.
make it with? What?
Reverend, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I've done 4 signature guitars with Reverend, so this is the 4th.
Wow.
People love it. It
That's
sounds
incredible.
chef's kiss.
Really?
Sure, chef now. All right, so let's go back. I got to keep you on my little timeline here. So you meet Nigel in 1991, somewhere around there. Future Primitive.
Yep.
I didn't know that was the original name. So was your intention with Nigel, okay, I want to do this type of music?
Well, what happened with him is that I met him through a friend of ours, and we had a long night together, and we were just playing. He loved the Gun Club birthday party, and it was just really exciting getting to know someone who could play. You see, because I'd been limited to the musicians I knew. The last guy was too bluesy for me. So it was like doing every time we'd do solos, be like, why is it? What I'm meaning is that the blues sound is just not good for me. It's just like, if John Mayer, who's an amazing blues guitar player, but if he played on my stuff, it would sound like that. So I tried to convince him to do a band together, and he said to me, look, I'm doing these training videos for clients, and they were paying me £1,000 a time. He's maybe doing a couple a week. He says, well, I can't really afford to take the time out to write songs for you. If you have songs, why don't I just demo them for you? So that's interesting. That's where it all began, that I wrote songs on my own. Oh. So I went and I was like, But
you never really wrote songs on your own before?
Never. I'd always been sat with someone.
Yeah.
So then I was like, oh my God, I was like, you're such a phony. Like, you say you're a singer, like, write a song already. So I sat down and started writing songs, and I was like amazed that, okay, and I found, it was like this liberation. And so I'd write and I'd take him, like the first song I took him was Come Down. And he demoed it up so good. And I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And I felt so free, because I felt constrained by the other bands because I had no control over the music. I could say what I liked, but I wasn't physically playing it. So it was a bit limiting. And by getting, I did write the songs myself, and then he plays on the top. He's doing all the Joey Santiago, all the semitone stuff, and everything's all happening. And he even did, when we did that was when Billy Cobham had that Safe From Harm, the Massive Attack had that sample out on their record on Safe From Harm. And that fit, it's similar. So I remember sitting in my bath in my apartment in London and thinking, that's it. It doesn't matter. I'm just now in a cool band. I'm never going to be successful. But the point is, this is
Yeah, you finally
cool.
man.
Because every time I'd play demos for people and they would be like, they look at me like it wasn't cool. And I'd be thinking to myself, I know it's not that cool, but it was just this terrible disconnect.
See, yeah.
So this was the first time he'd be playing stuff. I'd be like, oh my God. And he was a master, Nigel, of finding the right notes. Just he could find the right notes, however simple they were. I mean, the Machine Head, the intro, it's just these octaves. It's nothing.
Yeah.
Yet in that moment, in that time, so the alchemy of those two notes of his chords, brilliant.
Yeah.
It's just so good, and he always would do it. He'd always find those notes and elevate whatever I did. So then when I go back to him, I say, I take the pressure off now, so finally can we write together? You know, now we'll go back to normal. He says, no, this is working great. I'm making my money and you're bringing me good songs. So once we built up a repertoire of, say, 12 songs, he said, let's try a band, let's rehearse them out, see what it's like. So I had a friend of mine who's a screenwriter, is a screenwriter. He subbed in at drums for us for a while, and he was a jazz drummer. So he was really fun, and he was on heroin at the time. So he really had a laid-back, good feel, right?
Oh my God.
And we had this bass player, Malcolm, who's a lovely Swedish guy, Malcolm Pardon. I thought there might be a problem in future if you had a bass player called Malcolm Pardon, but he was a really amazing bass player. He left, and then I got this drummer called Amir, who was an Iranian jazz drummer, because I love jazz drummers in rock. You know,
is it because of the swing in it?
It's the feel.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I would consider like Jimmy has that feel. Matt from Sound.
Yeah, there's an internal swing.
Yes, as opposed to much more.
It's weird when you
drum.
play with a guy who's a great drummer but doesn't have the internal swing.
Yeah,
it feels a little too.
Yeah. That's most rock drummers for me. So, then he left to join a 12-piece jazz band just before we signed our record deal. I was so sad to lose Amir. He was brilliant. And then we got Robin, who's a great drummer, but much more straighter. But he did great for us. And then now these last few years, I've got a drummer who's much more in the middle with a lot of jazzy chops and vibe.
So,
Nick Hughes.
Walk me through this. I mean, we don't have to go too long into it, but my understanding is you kind of get a deal with Disney's Hollywood Records, and they just kind of stall you for a while. You kind of do that spin that they would do.
Well, no, what happened is we delivered the record that was 16 Stone to them, and that's the story is according to the guy from our label, Rob Kahane, that they at the company, they threw the CD at him and said, not only are there no singles on this record, there's no album tracks, and threw the record at him because Frank Wells, who'd signed us, got killed in a helicopter crash. So we're being reviewed by the team there, the subsequent team there, you know? And they dropped us.
Was Frank Wells killed in that crash with Stevie Ray Vaughan? And
I don't know. No, I don't think so. The same crash, but it was just a helicopter crash. So I was just so confused, you know, because I did the record, then I went back to work. You know, I was back painting. So I was like, well, okay, you made the record. I had no idea what was possible. No one told me what was possible. I didn't know what was possible. I was living in London, you know.
And you're dealing with an American record company, right?
Yeah. So I didn't know what, you know.
Was there not interest in you guys in the UK?
There was interest
to rock, or
there was that was the height of Britpop, right? So that was people were looking for like the next Pulp, and the next Oasis, and
Blur,
and our style, I suppose. So I was well known enough to the whole community to get demo time, so I could always afford to go and make the demos. I've never hear back what they thought of the demos, but I quietly was building up the repertoire of like having the real band, because Nigel would do the stuff at his house. And then we'd go in, and so all those recordings were paid for by, all the different labels in London.
Yeah.
So we just like, okay, thank you. Get 3 days in the studio, and you just try and do, you do 4 songs, that sort of thing, and you cram it. And so then when I got this, then I did a TV show called it was the midweek show on Channel 4 for a TV show, and they always showed an unsigned band, and they did a video. So that worked as a video for us. Went to this guy in America, and then we had all the songs. That was all 16 Stone.
Wow.
And they
I know that story. Yeah.
they said he's like, oh yeah, we'll sign him. And then everyone was like, don't sign with the guy in the valley. He's crazy. And I was like, or do what? Or do what? Sometimes in life you got to jump.
Yeah.
So we just decided to jump. And
This is Interscope?
well, no, that was the trauma. Then so we did the record. Then
Oh,
then
okay.
then they said, oh, distribution's fallen through. What does that mean? You know, we're dumb young. What does that mean? Well, there's no one to distribute the record.
Yeah, we can put it out, but no one's going to. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no one to take it from store to store. Literally can't distribute it. Oh, what are you going to do about that? Don't worry, just leave it with us. So then I got the, it was working, and I was doing 11 dentist offices. I've said that story, but so we're very Kafka because there were sort of large offices painted in magnolia color. So it was very weird. Which is this
Over and over?
I was like, yeah, and but I didn't feel bad because I sort of felt quite excited that I'd made a record that I was proud of. I felt good. I felt like, okay, so where's life going to take you now? You know, you're a musician. You have this record. My aunt, who I grew up with and was like my second mum to me, like you brought up to me, she knew this guy called Colin, and he'd made one record, and it was just coolest when he came around because he was on a record. He was like he did a sort of a yacht rock, early yacht rock stuff. I don't know what it was, but it's just like she had a record with Colin on it.
He had a record.
And he came around to the house, and because she lived with us, I just thought, that's so cool. So like, I've done it, I've got a record, and now let's see what, you're young and just bouncing around and getting on with life. And then when they said, oh, you have to come to LA. K-Rock's playing your song. It's a hit on K-Rock. I was like, that's amazing. What is
Did they know?
K-Rock?
Did they even?
What is?
Did you know they were even putting it out?
No,
No one even told you?
no.
That's such a record label thing.
Yeah, it's a very.
So what they probably did is throw it at the wall to see if it would stick.
Well, no, what they did is they had got the interest from K-Rock. Kevin started playing it. Then Ted Field heard it. He A&R'd me from his car on K.
Wow.
And he said, come to America. I remember it was in the middle of, come to America. Your record is really taking off at K-Rock, and we need you to come out here. So I came back out, and then they took me to the record company to see Jimmy and Ted. And now I'd been to all these labels before and been rejected 100 times. So I was like, what? I've flown all this way. I don't understand. I thought you were my record deal. I was so naive. It's just an independent label. Yeah, we don't have the capacity to distribute the record. We just signed to us. Okay.
So Interscope wanted to basically do a deal with Trauma because of your record.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they did the distribution, and that's how then that's when No Doubt, who'd been languishing on the 5 years, making the record, that's when they got picked up. Jimmy said, go with this guy. Look what he's done with this band. And that guy did it for them as well. That's how that worked.
That's crazy.
So, yeah, that's how it works. So that's how that was it. So isn't it amazing how life is like these, just like on a knife edge of things, like these things, wasn't like,
could have been,
feeding frenzy.
It could have been that one day that somebody decided no, and we would know who you are.
There was no feeding frenzy. There was no feeding.
Yeah, well, we got rejected 20 times, before we got signed. And even then they were kind of like, okay, we're going to give you this little side deal. So I know that feeling. You're like, you're waiting and waiting, and you're like, what are we waiting for? Is it it's either a yes or a no?
I feel like I'm still waiting.
Waiting for what, though?
Well, that's the thing. Just the next step. Just what is it, to just, how are the wolves really at the door, I think that some people have it, I don't mind it. I sort of feels quite, it feels solid to be always in a situation where you are making your own way.
Okay.
It feels like that, like, I don't know what it feels like for you, but it never stops being a fight, never stops being it's to convince people of this, I want to do that. It's never, nothing's easy, nothing, oh, of course, what a great idea. Let's help you do that. It's just always a bit like, a bit challenging.
My thing is, I finally realized the fight is with me. It took me about 40 years to figure that one out.
Right.
It's strictly with me. I've been fighting me the whole time.
It's worked for you.
Yes and no. Okay, so I love that you've explained all this because it does help me understand. Because, of course, I'm just in a band and here you guys come and suddenly you're on the radio and all that stuff. And as you know, I was very critical at the time of what I perceived as second wave bands, bandwagon, suddenly like, oh, now everybody wants to do grunge. You know what I mean?
Everybody's sad.
Sure. A minor to eternity. So, how did you, because you're telling a beautiful story, which is like, it just kind of happened and I had faith and I found the right guy and we did the thing and here we are and it looks like nothing's going to happen and suddenly it's happening and suddenly I'm in LA and Jimmy Iovine wants to talk to me.
Yeah.
And then boom, you're thrown you're as red meat into this culture war that was going on in America about authenticity, about who sounds like who and who has a right to play loud guitar and all that. How'd you feel about all that?
Well, it was like bursting into the best party ever and you're naked. You know what I mean?
You're very good looking, so it wouldn't be such a bad thing.
I just mean the idea that I think that before I found a way to connect with people that like the band, I just always felt out of place, really out of place. Like I just knew that there was something. I even had this weirdest thing when I was a kid. I used to dream about Los Angeles. I had no reality, no connection, or no justification for that. It just seemed to be some sort of Xanadu, some place that could save me, and some place that I just wanted to get away from where I was. I was desperate to get away. It seemed so grey and dark and dour, and I just couldn't. All I could think of Los Angeles, but I had nothing tangible that would justify that. It just was a notion, an idea,
Yeah, well, like a Shangri-La, right?
Yeah.
So, but I just want to persist in the question a little bit more because I remember this very acutely, and you and I talked about it around those times. But I want to hear your impression now. It's not an easy place to be if you're being held up as the example of something, especially. And I learned to know this about you over time. I didn't have that impression at the time, but over time I gained, I think, what is a more refined impression of what you were doing musically. But it couldn't have been easy to kind of be given a certain amount of stick about it.
Yeah, well, it was so like it was as if when I got going and was selling the records or having people come to the shows, I felt suddenly I was in the right place. This is where I should be. This is why I was like hanging on to the rope, wouldn't let go through all the things going past me. So therefore, it was disappointing to not be, to have that disconnect for people.
Yeah.
Because it was like, in our journey, it was like, damn, I don't know, we just wrote these songs and like everyone said no for so long, and then somehow we got in, we snuck in the door and suddenly we're inside the building and people like it. I don't know. So we were sort of vilified for that. But yeah, it was. I think it was hardest. So the biggest disappointment was from contemporaries. With journalists, it just was sort of. It seemed par for the course. One of my favorite things I ever did was interview Marky Smith. The Four were a massive band for me. I love the Four.
Great band.
Just
amazing. And what a brilliant
lyricist.
And yeah, all of it.
And when I did it, I did an interview with him once for Q magazine, and where we were interviewed by the same journalist. And I've never seen anyone terrorize a journalist better than Marky Smith. It was just unbelievable. And I was just so naive and not good at it. And I always, I kept thinking I should have been more cynical. I should have been more, I should have,
That's not your nature, though.
No, it wasn't so. But it didn't serve me well because I just would go into these interviews and these situations like kind of gormlessly and just open and then just kind of get savaged.
Well, at least you understand maybe a little bit better now why I was the way I was then.
Right.
I wouldn't take that.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I wasn't savage in the moment. it was.
So they would come at me in the moment.
Oh, right. No, I was never. I would have preferred that because it's not like, it's like I grew up in a major city, so I'm perfectly good with confrontation.
Yeah.
It's sometimes easier because then I know, oh,
Just
this is where we're at.
just
This is where we're
throw
at.
it on the
But
table.
when you're just sort of when you're naive and waffling and just full of youth and nonsense, that could be just like, tailor-made any way you like. I did have a guy come up to me actually at Sasha's house, my ex-drummer guy helped me out, a guy from Rolling Stone who had said to me, he said, he waited till other people had gone into another room, there's a whole big dinner, and he wanted to talk to me on my own, and he said, I want to really apologize to you for my review of Razor Blade Suitcase. There was an editorial slant when I was told, and Steve Albini had said, you should listen to this band. You must listen to this band. Don't count this band out. They're much more interesting than you think. And he said, I wouldn't do it, and I savaged you, and I just want to apologize for that. I said, well, I sure hope you feel better.
Yeah, to give some context to what you're saying, I've met journalists through the years, and they would turn in a review of our records, and the editor would say, you need to go back and rewrite this and slag the band, or you're going to lose your job.
It's just so weird because I don't think of you like that. I think of the Pumpkins as such a
we got horrible
band.
We got horrible reviews in the time. Horrible. Yeah. You got too much. You got kids, but we got horrible reviews. Horrible. Especially in the UK. The worst reviews we got was in the UK.
Right. That doesn't really make sense to me, but I was completely unaware of that. That's
well, it always looks rosy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you quite had your fair accolades of the devastating place you have in music, the musicality that you brought to rock. There's no one who's done it like that.
Oh, God bless you.
I do think that.
Thank you.
And it's funny because my son is so in love with your band that I hear more Pumpkins than anything else in my life.
It's my great revenge on you.
No, it's no problem. It's devastating. And it occurred to me, it's funny that when you're young, we had that lovely talk at the MTV Awards, I think it's in Europe, where you said in the Science of Things, you said, I'm finally a fan. He said, I'm finally a fan. I listened to your record and I'm finally a fan. It was the third album. And I was like, and then I remember you said to me, we were talking and it was really fun for me to talk to you. I sort of respected you so much at that point as I do now. And I said to you, you said, yeah, I mean, you had your MTV moment. And I was like, I did. I did. God, I remember leaving there thinking, God, I guess I've had my moment with MTV.
I'm terrible. You reminded me of the first time we ever really talked. And I love and respect this about you to this day. We were somewhere at something, God knows where we were in the 90s, and I saw you and I thought, oh God, because I'd said dumb about you. And you came up and you said, why are you saying these things about me and my band? You know what I mean? And we had this kind of conversation where I was very honest with you about my impressions. And you said, okay. And I was like, oh, he's a good guy. You know what I mean? And that became, I don't want to say it's a relationship, but we've had this like beautiful kind of connection ever since then. It was like the first time I saw you as a real person,
right?
Not a construction, not a record company fiction,
right?
And then because of that, then I started paying attention, and then I became a fan. And now, because I know I was going to talk to you, I went back and listened to everything again, and so much of the stuff holds up so well.
Thank you.
It's aged really, really well. Well produced, well sung, great lyrics. So you proved me and a ton of people wrong. And I mean, I figured it out in the 90s that you were part of us. Because it was hard for us to even earn, even one quick thing, because you worked with Steve Albini. When Steve passed away not too long ago, and it was obviously a sad thing and way too young, people dug up all these quotes where Steve was slagging us off, like way, way back in the day. And I said it on one thing, but nobody really caught it. I talked about how Steve and I got to know each other, and Steve was amazing with me. He would lend us gear. He saved my ass a couple times with like studio stuff. I recorded it electrical. He was a fucking great guy. So it's this idea of like that, red team, blue team, You know what I mean? So I made the same mistake that Steve had made with me, you know.
Right.
He's there, I'm over here,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm here and you're over there. And then eventually I'll figure out like, no, we're actually all kind of in the same club and we kind of come at it from different ways. And in a good way, I'm appreciative of Steve because Steve was, if you're going to hold people up on the, let's call it the Integrity Olympics, Steve was the Integrity Olympics. He was that guy. He was the guy who would record a band for $500. He was the guy who lived it. I mean, he wasn't just, a lot of those people are fake, as you know,
Right.
the indie people, right? Steve was the real deal. So if Steve held you up to that mirror, you kind of had to look at it and say, okay, why am I really doing this? So anyway, the point I was trying to make is, you know, I think it's really cool that it's all kind of worked out. I don't know if you feel that, but I feel that now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that
I mean, you guys are doing big tours and
yeah,
it's
making records.
beautiful.
So, yeah, and I think I hope it just comes down to just the eyes always being on the right thing, which is just to be as great as possible. And like you're saying, the battles with yourself. For me, in our world, the better the song you write, the better the performance you give, the easier your life is anyway. Do you know what I mean? And I just feel deeply at the wheel of my creativity. I don't feel like I'm phoning in any records, any songs. I'm not I feel very, very in control and like the best at editing myself I've ever been.
Well, what's interesting, because I went back and listened to the catalog recently, and from the first to that third album, there's this kind of figuring out that goes on. It might have been the touring, it might have been confidence, but when you hit that third album, you've arrived. Like you sound like you. It's your world. It's your music.
Yeah.
And people can't see that about you, I think, including myself, and it took me a hot minute to do it. It sells what you did short. And I think I have this whole rant that I've been doing lately, but it's essentially like this. We all grew up in the shadow of the baby boomers. You know, all we ever heard about was the Beatles and Pink Floyd and the Stones, and they're still going, right? We had to kind of fight as a generation to kind of say, this is who we are. We have a different way of doing it. And in a weird kind of way, because we grew up in a baby boomer system, it pitted us against each other. We had to kind of fight to be on MTV or fight the, you know what I mean? Because the oxygen for rock bands at that time was very, very limited. So I think there's something sort of beautiful about like, almost like when soldiers reconcile after a war. It's like we all survived that. Those magazines, what they cared about don't matter, but our music has endured. And the fact that we can lovingly respect, like, wow, what you did and what I did and what Steve did and what the Pixies did, we can all step back and say, wow, that we did anything at all is a miracle. Sure. And the fact that 30 years later, that people care, particularly young people,
right? That's
the most like humbling thing. So when you say that your son loves my band, it's like it hits me right in the heart because
he is really, really respectful.
He's also a tea drinker from our.
He's oh my God, that was the best day of his life when he got that package from Chloe. He just thought it was a great.
My wife loves you, by the way. It's just so you know. She said to say hello to you. So, since we were talking about Steve, talk a little bit about working with Steve. Abbey Road. It's the year 1996.
Well, I remember.
You remember 1996?
Yes, I do. Well, I remember going for lunch with him because I got one of the greatest letters from Steve, one of the great letters of my life. So I went for lunch on we were on tour and we were just playing clubs, but we had a day off in Chicago, and they said, doing a new record, who do you think of working with? Now that's when I'd loved obviously the Pixies, but also PJ Harvey's record, that Rid of Me had come out, and
that was Steve.
Yeah.
Oh.
And that was my favorite record of hers. It still is. And super bluesy, but really.
But even the way she.
Oh, yes.
To be fair, I don't know her. I don't know Polly, but somehow she made the blues sound fresh.
Yeah, because she's so fresh. But
yeah,
for sure. But so when I heard that record, it just filled me. I remember listening when we actually were making 16 Stone, I remember. And I said to Clive Lang, can you make it more like this? He goes, you got to write the songs like that. So, whatever. When I was going to make a record, I just thought, oh my God, Steve would be amazing, because we've been on tour now for 2-3 years. We'd actually gone from clubs, theaters, we were playing arenas on that one record. And so it was like, we basically, maybe there's Dave Jordan I'd spoken to, but I went to have lunch with Steve and I didn't know what it'd be like. I remember I met David Yow for the first time at Roskilde, and I said to him, I was so naive and an idiot. I was like, I can't wait to meet Steve. He's so pure, he's so real. And Yow goes, yeah, he's really real. I was like, I knew then I'd like, I was not a good poker player. But then I went there, so I went out to lunch with him, and I went for lunch with him and Heather. We went for a Greek restaurant, Greek town in Chicago. And
Which, by the way, Pete Katzis, who's works with you,
yeah,
and I've known Pete for 35 years. His dad used to run around that very part of Chicago.
yeah,
Pete,
they paid him.
Nick the Greek, I think, was his.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Protection money. So we go for lunch, and we're just talking, whatever. And I got this great letter, paraphrasing the letter. And he says, Dear Dave, who's our manager at the time, I've been around so many people in the music business that I'm almost not inured to the bullshit that's around me. Heather, however, has an excellent detector and has found Gavin in fine form. And so therefore, I'm more than happy to extend my services and work with Bush for their upcoming album. What details to follow. And so it's a great moment. And yeah, we did, first off, we did a little bit in the countryside at Trevor Horn's studio. And it was funny seeing Steve in a domestic setting with like the birds chirping in a wonderful old Tudor home. And it sort of didn't seem right, And then he had to go back to do something. And then when he came in, he had a problem. And we ended up, he said, we cancelled that place and we're going to go to Abbey Road. So we did Studio 2 where the Beatles worked. And he did everything live. Like, it was so wild. Like,
Well, the tracking was live.
Yeah, he didn't really believe in much overdubs unless it was compositionally intended. If you said, like, I said, Steve, this is chorus is cool, can I put a harmony on it? So he's like, okay. So I come back and I see the track listing, Pointless Harmony. The album, I wanted to call the album Pointless Harmony.
That's a pretty good title.
I should have called it.
I'd still use that.
It's so good. And
were you happy with the way it turned out?
Yeah, I think that what happened is that I wish that I kept on forcing him to say, I know you're not a producer, but Steve, just what should we do? Help us. Because I would have edited it a bit. I think that we've gotten so into extending songs to accommodate playing live, to play an hour and a half.
Yeah.
That I just don't know why I thought it was. It was talking about Glenn Branca and Cycles Repetition. I don't know why it was so necessary to stay so long before I'd start singing or something. I'd be like, it's not that these two chords are not that good. Things like that I just wished he'd just moved me along a bit.
Yeah.
But so that's kind of it. So, but what I do get from it is a capturing of a band, which what I wanted. It was somewhat suicidal in the face of the criticism with Nirvana and the fact.
I was going to ask that. I mean, it's kind of like running into the rotor blades.
Yeah, but it's like I just like it. Now you'll see the difference between the bands. I was like, this is exactly how you'll find the difference between the bands. And I was already on a losing streak on that thing anyway, so it was a kind of a you. It was like no one was the people that wanted to hate me at that point. For those,
well, it was a #1 album. So guessed right.
Yeah, Jimmy Iovine was like, you took a chance. You were right.
That's a good Jimmy.
Yeah, he's one of the few compliments. But yeah, it was just such a seismic moment. If you can imagine, we go back to a conversation about the Pixies, to have been inspired to do music and to find my direction through the Pixies, then to do a record that with Steve Albini and with the same artwork and the way that I listened, looked at don't you remember the artwork,
Yeah.
the Matador girl, the gold cover, the monkey. I just was like, this is so beautiful. I couldn't believe it. And it wasn't Prince, it wasn't Aerosmith, it wasn't what was happening. It just was this new thing. And those records were larger than life. And so for me, I just was like, well, those people kind of hate me anyway. What am I going to do? I'm not getting them anyway. But not. What am I going to? How am I going to get them back?
Why was it 3 years after that record before you guys put out a third?
Because
A lot of touring,
a
or
lot of touring, 2 years of touring, and then that was the science of things after that. That was the one because I got Clive Langer involved, and I said, I really want to do. It sounds ridiculous now. I mean, Nine Inch Nails were obviously doing it, but I was like, I want to combine this. I wanted to combine more of London. You know, what happened is that I was taking the criticism, and I was trying to sort of work out what would sidestep it. What am I missing? And I was like, do you have enough of England? Do you have enough of London in your sound?
oh, interesting.
And London was all remixes, dance,
Kind of drum and bass time.
drum and bass, everything like that. So I was like, why don't we incorporate, just get a bit of London? Maybe they're right. You know, you don't want to, if someone criticizes you, most of the time your instinct is like, yeah, them. And then one bit they're like, what was that you were saying about that? What was that? So you go, because you tick it off if things are fair or not.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, well, on a place level, they might have a point. So I thought that. What I did is I said to Clive, we're going to have this hybrid thing. We have Johnny Rockstar, who's a amazing programmer, so high. He just would take ages on everything you're programming. But I'd say we combine it. We have these rock songs, but then we've got like a Chemicals Between Us, which is like much more kind of tricked out. And then we're going to have the straightforward rock songs.
Yeah.
But we're just going to create this thing where we get people used to, that feeling. That was where it began. Wanted to experiment, really, and that's what I did. And then the next one was with Dave Sardi that we did make in America. Then it was like, okay, well, let's just say it was like making it in America.
Yeah, like I was saying before, I think that's the record where like it all kind of came together.
Mm.
Did you feel that at the time?
Yeah, just every record I make is an opportunity to learn something different. I mean, even up till now, the songs I put together, I play a song, I love it, this is so great, and I don't know why I like it so much. And then I realize it's the harmonic minor scale, and I realize that really speaks to me.
Yeah, yeah.
Really, I just love all those changes. And then so every song still remains a voyage of discovery. I'm not sort of good enough to be like, oh, I'm just going to do this one again. I'm always like, wow, what goes on to do that? And what I find really intriguing is because I have my studio and I can engineer myself enough and I can play the keyboards on it and make a lot of soundscapes, dreamscapes that people add to or subtract to from whatever. I'll put things together that the alchemy of music is still so magical to me. If I go backwards and I'm asked to recreate that, I'm at a loss to know why it was so nice that those two chords together, what that counterpoint was, all these beautiful accidents that happen in music. Harmony is the understanding of harmony is just it goes on.
Did you ever study it?
Yeah, I have studied for years.
Yeah.
To play, and I studied piano, which I haven't been playing recently, which is really annoying. And my son told me as well the other day, do you know that Billy also says he's as good at piano as a guitar?
That's not true.
And I said to him,
I wish it was true.
I said to him, you go and play. Why do I never hear you playing? You've got a beautiful upright here in the studio. So if you're that inspired, do it.
Mm-hmm. Not true. I play piano terribly.
I'm not going to tell him that.
I call it panda piano. It's like how a panda would play like this. There's of course one more record, but then was it the end of the 2000s, the dissipation of the record business? Was it the band grew stale? What was the general condition that led to the band sort of stopping there?
I think that one guy had missed the one kid growing up because he'd been working so solidly. And I felt I wasn't sure where I was going, and that's why I did the Institute record. You know, I thought this is going to just pep me up. It did. You know, I worked with Paige.
Yeah.
I should have just done drop records from then. You know, but I did a record with Paige, and I loved all the songs. And I thought, why are they not all? And then when I went, then I went back to the band and said we're going to get it back together again, and they said still not ready.
Ah, I didn't know
And I
that.
was like, and I really listened to the worst part of my ego, and I thought I'll do a solo record.
Mm.
Nobody wants a solo record from a singer in a rock band. I feel
I've had a similar.
Jerry Cantrell aside, because we love him and we toured with him in his solo thing. But I just think that people wouldn't. They want us in our bands. That's for me. They want me in the
Yeah,
band.
there's something that happens when you go out of your band. They're almost like mad at you.
Yeah, it's so not even almost. Everyone was mad at me, and I was like, it's not even my fault. They don't want to do it. I should have.
They don't want to hear that. They don't give.
And then what the weirdest thing happened to me is that then was the most collaborative on my solo record. Then I was told I have to go and work with everyone. So I worked with Dave Stewart, I worked with Linda Perry, I go and work with songwriters. I've never been in a room and jamming with someone, because imagine I told you that every song I'd written on my own, I take in, they amend and change and do stuff like that. I work with adults, so it's a democracy. But you know, the better the presentation of the song, the less they're going to change. You know, unless they feel intrigued or desire to. So, you know, I think.
We don't do gossip here, but you did marry a famous person. And what struck me about it is you've had these periods in your life. I don't even know if I can be succinct about it, but it's like maybe the simple way to be put it is you finding yourself, or you put yourself in this bigger circumstance and somehow you got to kind of find yourself. Throwing yourself into the celebrity maw of LA, particularly as a celebrity couple. How do you feel about all that? Because I don't know, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I know what people do to kind of smile and work with it, because it's an energy, and like a bullfighter, you got to kind of, you know, there's an advantageous and a disadvantageous, and we all are aware what the disadvantageous part of it is. But it struck me as interesting that suddenly now you're in the heat of this other thing.
Yeah.
And it's not musical per se, it's celebrity driven.
Yeah. It's so simple. I just really, you know, when I met her, it was just magic. It was just instant. And so
Which she's a pretty magical person.
yeah, she is. And so that's all that I met. That's all that, you know, I was just she changed me so much, you know, she sort of softened me in so many ways, you know. She comes from such a wholesome life that there was some taming qualities to it that was incredibly special. So I prioritized that feeling over any interpretation of it. I was moving so fast at that point. So many things were going on, you know, from all angles, that wisdom wasn't one of them, and reflection wasn't one of my qualities at the time. I just was extremely just thought she was amazing, and that was all that mattered. And everything else was a consequence of that. You know, it wasn't
Yeah, I get that.
no, that was it.
Why the dabbling into acting? Was that like a curiosity, or was it an opportunity because you're kind of in it?
I think it was just the desire to do something creative that I didn't have to think of first. You know,
Like,
you know,
show me where to stand and I'll.
well,
Makes sense. I don't mean in a demeaning.
no. I just mean that, you know, I think we're the same. When we go to work, you know, you start with a blank screen or a blank bit of paper, and like I was talking.
That anxiety is something I think most people don't understand.
Well, it's just right there. It's just a blank bit of space, silent screen looking at you saying, "Make me good." So I think there was something about because I love words so much, that I think that it was inspiring to, and I never did so much of it that it took away. Because whenever I did a movie, all the crew would be like, you know, when's the next record? Mad at me. You talk about doing a solo record, try doing a movie. People are like, what the fuck are you doing? You don't care.
Yeah.
They do a movie, we don't care about you being an actor. But I like that process, and I do. It was inspiring. It did always make me run back to doing music, because I was like, I know, it's my main thing. But I thought that Tom Waits, who's an incredible artist, one of my favorite artists of all time, the way that he just showed up in movies, that would be amazing. You'd be like, what is he doing here?
Yeah.
I just thought that was an interesting thing to do, and it was just creative. And I didn't, yeah, and it didn't. I was poised at one point after Constantine. It was like I did have a massive agent, and I was poised for a whole different life. That the universe said, mm-mm, "No, you're not."
Was it signs, or was it something you just weren't feeling?
Oh, it was stuff I didn't get hired for. It just didn't work out for me
I
in the
see.
way that I thought.
The stars didn't align.
Stars did not align. I turned down. We turned down the Transporter film. We got offered right after Luc Besson, and that would have until there's something better will come along, and nothing did.
I see.
Nothing better came along, and then I did that classic one. I had this manager who wasn't really helping me. Asked the said big agent, "Hey, do you think Gavin should still be with you?" Or, like to sort of rattle his cage a bit. Now he should have said, "No way, I'm going to step it up." And he's like, "Maybe a smaller agent." So that was the end of that. So I was like, wow, that was at the height of, I was like, okay.
Yeah,
But I don't feel regret.
It's brutal up there.
Yeah, but I don't feel any regret about it. I mean, I still do some auditioning. I still fail some things. And then some things I get. I was in Sofia Coppola's movie. I was in this movie just before COVID. So they come along. I like them, it's a fun thing.
The reason I ask is in the last few years, maybe since the pandemic ended, you seem to have found like a renewed musical kind of wind or energy, or it's like it's not just the fans rallying up around you in a new generation that wants to hear your music. You seem to be kind of entering into a place of commitment.
Yeah.
And I know you decently well, not great, but I know you decently well. And even when I see clips of you, like your energy on stage is somebody who's convicted and you're present.
Yeah.
That's something I think maybe we as performers, you can kind of read, like, does he really want to be there?
Right. No, I really want to be there.
I can feel that. And I'm happy. And by the way, I'm happy for you because you deserve that.
Thank you. I think that it's just an exciting time.
It's such a cool time.
Yeah, I think it's an exciting time. I have the freedom to make records. People still want to come. I spoke to my friend the other day, and I was feeling a bit blue because I have deep sort of conflicted emotions when I'm about to leave for a long time, because I feel very guilty. I know that when I'm out there and I'm doing it, it makes sense. But before and I just feel like I'm betraying every single entity, person, my kids, my dog. They're all like counting on me being there. And it's like, by the way, I won't be here. So I have this it's quite hard for me. So I was talking to my friend the other day, my oldest buddy from England, and I was like, yeah, it feels heavy. He goes, oh, what you mean? It feels really hard to travel around the world for 5 months and people wanting to see your songs, wanting to play live, the songs you wrote. They must be awful. What a terrible feeling. How do you cope? And I was like, all right, I know, but you know what I mean? I was just feeling a bit blue. But do you feel the same way? I mean, you have young children, so it must be.
I don't feel that way. No. One thing that we've done, my wife and I, is we made the decision when my son was a baby that we would just include them as much as possible. So I'll take my kids on the road, just me and them, no nanny. So when the band's rehearsing, they're on stage with like the gun range headphones on.
Right. But but when they go to school, that's a bit harder.
No, they're homeschooled.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I would do that. So they go with you everywhere?
Yeah. I mean, not all the time, but I'm saying is we live a life where it's totally modular.
Yeah. Yes.
So if I'm going on a 6-week run, my kids might be out for 2 or 3 of the weeks.
Got it.
And then by the time they're done with 3 weeks of tour, they're like, I want to go home and see my cat. Right. They're happy to leave me. Right. You enjoy your tour, Dad. I'm going home because I want to see my cat.
That's a great.
So it's beautiful because it sort of balances out.
Mm. Yeah, very lucky. Chloe obviously is a perfect foil for that. If I was with, someone who has a job that can't leave or a job that takes places, then you get that disconnect.
No, it's difficult because it's ultimately there's a form of selfishness in it. Do you know what I'm saying? All artists are selfish. Mm-hmm. It's just the nature of the beast. I must go somewhere and be with my own thoughts. And by the way, I must share them. And not only must I share them, I need you to buy them. It's a bit there is a selfishness there, but I think once the model's been proven, and in your case, over 30 years, it doesn't matter what the wellspring of the thing is anymore. It exists for a reason. There's ultimately a healing or a larger message at play. And the thing I try to tell my children is we're involved in something that's bigger than our family, and we're a show business family. And so what we do is we entertain and we put smiles on people's faces. So you're part of that process. So when we're here, we're doing this, and when we're out, we're doing that, and that's just the way it goes. It's not to say they don't have agency in the decision-making process, because when they say to me, I want to go home, I'm like, okay, I'll put you on a plane tomorrow if you want to go home. You don't have to stay out here with Dad on tour in Helsinki, you know what I mean? It's kind of up to you.
Right.
And so we've kind of found this interesting balance, but I realize it's not for everybody. It's a difficult, because there are times where, like, my kids don't give up where the hell we are. They're tired, and
Yeah.
they just want to watch TV, and I'm like, we got to go to the gig, and they're like,
Right.
do we have to? Can you skip the gig today, Dad? Um, I thought to ask you this one thing, because it's very rare that uh, people have a common experience that most people wouldn't understand. If you talk about this or I talk about this, it sounds a bit, having a go, but I like the idea of having it in this context. When you have success and you have a catalog, and then fans come to see you play, what's your because you've put out 4 albums since the band reformed in 2010, is that right? So what's your vibe on, like, the expectation of the audience, the hits versus new material? Like, how do you sit on all that?
I think of it from my own perspective when I go and see a band that I love. There are certain songs that I do want them to play, and things I don't want to let me down on. But as long as they still put their, foot to the floor when they write new songs, then they should play whatever they want.
Yeah.
I don't think that obscure, like I often think of sets in tempos,
Okay.
and just what you might want. And if, I'll be fully aware if I've had, like, 2 or 3 similar tempos, then I know I'm gonna have to pick it up.
Yeah.
So I'm always just trying to avoid that lull 3/4 of the way through the show where
I love the lull.
someone offers to go buy the drinks. I mean, because the lull, you play the beautiful song, you do something, but I'm just always thinking that people are spoiled, and they just want to be blown away by you. This is ready. It's like it's sort of a best man speech. Like, people come to your show, especially with us, when they have the history of the bands, they want to have a great time. So you've really got to get up to get up. So in that case,
I'm laughing because I so enjoy this process.
I make sure that on a skeletal level, we never veer too far away, too long away from footholds they would know.
Yeah.
To keep them in there.
Yeah.
You can't satisfy everyone, especially when you do an hour set, or like a Lollapalooza. We did an hour. So there, hour and a half, I can give a nice spread of, don't let you down. This is new, but nothing, in those spots where you maybe extract something they might know, you got to make sure it's up, it's driving, definitely going to be detuned.
Yeah.
And it's there. People makes sense, right? So that's how I do it, and I try and change it up. What I do is I have slots, so like the skeleton set, and then there'll be a space where that could be one of 5 songs can go in there. I always wanted to do that thing of where you do the completely different sets, but we just tried that and it was too confusing.
We played with you somewhere, like in the far east or something. I don't remember. It was somewhere, and I watched about half your show, and then I went back to warm up, but I could still hear you playing, and you put so much pressure on the set that I was playing, because you played such a great set. Because it had an up-tempo feel. Maybe does it make sense? Yeah. Not that it was always up-tempo, but it had up. The energy was very up for your show.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, motherfucker, I got to go out.
But we should. I look forward to the day when we tour together again. I think when we played in Portugal, I remember Portugal was that warm night, and I just thought that we fit really well together.
I'd love it. Anytime. Love to tour with you. Couple last questions. I feel like the wheel is finally turning the right way with you, and I'm happy about that because I really think, our ranks are thin. We lost a lot of great people along the way, and I like it when all of us collectively, not that we're all friends, but uh, I like it when we're all strong.
Yeah,
I think we actually all win more if we're all strong.
I agree.
Um, so what do you want the people, because you've survived, whatever the bullshit was, and the 90s was its own bullshit, and then there's the downturn in the music business, and there's the classic, greatest hits kind of mentality of 2000 audiences and stuff like that. Where do you think the band's landing now? And I don't mean in the present tense. I mean, if people are looking, a 20-year-old kid is looking and they don't care about any of the politics, anything, and they look like, okay, this band was there, this band was there. What do you want them to understand about your band?
Well, I appreciate everything you're saying because it's concisely putting a sort of an elephant to bed kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's very, very welcome. We appreciate that. I think it's just to do with, I believe in rock music. I think that it really, it
You like
has,
you like your guitar.
I love guitar and I love the emphasis and I like the way that the combination of a lyric, a sentiment, and what a guitar can do, either softly, gently, mayonnaise, or what a guitar can do aggressively. Either way, I find it really expressive.
Yeah.
And so for me, anyone who's doing rock records, I'm so in awe of and I'm proud of, because I think that exactly to what you're saying, the funniest part is that it was a ruse all along. They made us, it was like we were just like fodder for the Roman Empire, and the people, because I would rather have 5 great records than 1 great record. So there is no competition. The competition has always been within the band, ourselves, to be the best we can be. And then everyone rise up and, extraordinary band with you, extraordinary Soundgarden, Nirvana. It's just all these incredible Pixies, Fugazi, Jesus Lizard, all these incredible bands. And isn't it beautiful that they coexist? The Deftones have also been, really, obviously one of the greatest bands, but really kind of endured and just sort of stayed
Right?
there, like
Chino just,
because he's such a great singer and it's such a great band. They deserve it. That's what.
but it's gained gravity over time, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the only time helps you understand that.
Yeah.
Basically, what the Deftones do and what they represent has gained energy and almost like, I don't know, it just feels like it's got more weight to it.
Yeah, for sure.
Or like with what Jerry does,
gravity.
Alice in Chains, always had that gravity.
But I think also, what's interesting is that, I try to allude to this on this record. I beat loneliness.
And you have these interviews aren't particularly time sensitive. We call them evergreen, but I know you have a new record.
Well, I have a new record. What I mean is that I think that it's a really important discussion around mental health, people's mental well-being, the truth about the melancholia of people, the disconnection of people, which in fairness, we've been singing about forever. That's what we've been doing.
Well, that's why we have a thing with Chloe called "Sorrow is the Family Business." That's what we do.
But you can now see it in the world, in the culture, that people are talking to it. We just use guitars with that. So I just like it when great bands are making great records. It was fantastic. I'm happy to see all these bands doing well, and I do like these younger bands coming up. I think that the extraordinary kind of post-metal sound, the sort of Bad Omen sound, the poppy. Just the records they make, it's just like the next level of it's
good.
Like, wow.
Good. It's healthy.
Yeah.
Okay, last thing. Gavin the chef. Take me into that.
I wanted to find a way to stay home. And I also wanted to find a way to get my voice back. I felt that I had been in this world for so long, the show business as such, and I had only been, this was before obviously podcasts and things like that, people now get a sense of what the other people like at an extended way. But before then, we were always at sort of at the mercy of the editor, of how they how we, the cadence of how we speak,
Yeah.
what we prioritize, interesting things. And that's like, now when we go on TV shows, we're not the actors, so no one asks us anything about how we're doing or what our day was like. We just play the song and fuck off.
Yeah.
And so I thought, I've always had this ability, weirdly, to put food together. I don't know, it's just being able to put food together. People say to me for years, "You should do a cooking show." I'll be like, "Doing what exactly?" I mean, so what? I can grill a steak, big whoopie-doo.
Yeah.
And then I just came across this thing of trying to create a way of staying home, not leaving to work, so I could be around my boys more. And I thought I'd do this interview show, and I thought it'd be so easy. And it was like a 7-year process of making
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
the pilots and then showing it to everyone, and people were like, "This is amazing," except for anyone who was a commanding editor. No one who made the reality TV
Yeah.
or unscripted is what we called. Nobody knew would sign me, know what to do with this. It was just like my music. I was just like, there's a world of no. But then you say to yourself, is it a world of no, or is it just we're slowly working our way towards yes from someone,
I see.
like it was in music? I just needed one person,
Yeah.
and in this I got one person, and that seems to be my fate, and gives me effectively my truth, because that's how it is. That's what life is like. There's no carpet rides, even though people would assume there are.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.